Hello, welcome back to Left in the Past. Today I got a good old story for you guys. It's one that you may have heard of before. It's the story of the Bell Witch. Before we actually get started in today's video, I just want to let y'all know, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to my channel and turn on post notifications so you get notified every time I post a new video. But with all that said, I hope y'all enjoyed today's video. I'll see y'all at the end. In the early 1800s, a man named John Bell decided that his farm in North Carolina was just way too small for him and his family. So he took his wife Lucy and their children and moved from North Carolina to the Red River bottomlands of now present-day Adams, Tennessee. They did this to obviously have more land so they was able to plant more crops and also to get a fresh start to their lives. Whenever they arrived to their new home, John decided to chop down a few trees off their property to build a log cabin, and everything was perfect until it became a living nightmare. One day in 1817, John went out to check on his fields and make sure all his crops were doing all right and nothing was wrong with them. And as he was staring out into the field, he noticed a strange dog-like creature staring at him. And it's said to be known that the creature had a dog-like body and a head like a rabbit. And as he kept staring at it, he got a little bit startled, so he decided to take his rifle and take a shot at it. And whenever he did that, the creature vanished and it just ran towards the tree line. And then John forgot about it and went on with his day, and he didn't really think about it until later that night. Later that night, once John and his family had went to bed, they started hearing loud knocking on the outside of their cabin, almost like somebody was trying to break down their walls. Them thinking it was just a prankster, they decided to shrug it off and go back to bed, until it kept happening day after day, getting more and more intense, growing their fear even more. John and his sons tried many times to capture this person doing this to them, but every single time that they tried, there was nobody there. They searched everywhere around their house every single time, and every time they did, they could not find nobody. There was no one there. Soon after these occurrences started to happen to them, the Bell's kids started getting woken up in the middle of the night to the sound of rats gnawing on their bedpost. So every time they would hear this, they would get up to go check it out, but every single time their feet hit the floor, the sound completely stopped. And every single time it happened, they decided to shrug it off because they didn't have time to worry about it. So every time they went back to sleep, right when they closed their eyes, the sound would start again. And over time, it just started to freak them out more and more. Before long, they were all terrified of the invisible entity that would terrorize them, such as doing things like ripping bed sheets and pillows into the floor each night. As these strange things continued, the Bells started to hear faint whispers around their house, also the sound of an old lady singing. And after their youngest child, Betsy, began crying about being beaten and receiving welts and bruises in the shape of a handprint all over her body, John went to his neighbor and friend James Johnson for advice and support. James and his wife decided to spend the night with the Bells to give them a little bit of comfort, but they were subjected to the same amount of horror that the Bells was. After James's covers was ripped away from him and him being slapped in the face multiple times while he was asleep, he decided to jump out of bed and shout, "In the name of God, who are you?" He didn't receive a reply, but the abuse stopped for the rest of the night, and the next morning he told John that it must be an evil entity, the kind that the Bible talks about. After the Johnsons had returned home, the activity in the house ramped up to alarming levels. The whispers they once heard increased to full-blown conversations, and the entity even recited verses and carried on intelligent conversations with the family. Word of the Bell Witch spread across the whole entire state of Tennessee, and it got the attention of then Major General Andrew Jackson, and whenever he heard of it, he decided to come down to the Bell Witch farm and do an investigation for himself. Jackson arrived with several men, as well as horses, and also a large wagon, and as they approached the Bell's property, the wagon got stuck in a muddy creek bed, and for some reason the horses refused to pull it out. After a few minutes of him trying to get the wagon out, he then shouted, "By the eternal boys, this must be the Bell Witch." No sooner after he said that, a disembodied voice of a woman spoke to Jackson and told him that him and his boys could proceed, as she would be seeing them later tonight. The horses then began to walk and pulling the wagon out of the mud with no issue, then continuing the rest of the way to the Bell's property. As Jackson and his men were setting up camp in the Bell's yard, one of the men started to brag about a silver bullet he had loaded in his gun, saying it would kill any evil spirit, and the Bell Witch was scared to mess with him in fear of being killed. Suddenly, he dropped to the ground, screaming in agonizing pain. He claimed he was being stabbed by pins and was being beaten severely. The woman's voice then came again, saying it was yet another fraud such as he was, that she would reveal to them later that night. At this point, Jackson's men were terrified and was begging Jackson to leave, but Jackson refused, because he wanted to see who the other fraud in the group was. The events the rest of the night were unclear, but Jackson and his men were spotted in Springfield, Tennessee the following morning, on their way back home. He proclaimed later that he would rather fight the British than fight the Bell Witch, and he would never return there again. After Jackson and his men left, the Bell Witch turned her sights on John. She proclaimed many times she was going to kill him. Her voice could be heard all over the family farm, cursing and making fun of John. Around this time, John began suffering from severe facial twitch, and also he had trouble swallowing. This went on for around a year, and it escalated to frequent seizures, and the Bell Witch would slap him as he recovered from his many frequent seizures, and she would even yank the shoes away from his feet when he tried to walk, and she would just completely torture him. On December 19th, 1820, John Bell fell into a coma where he was then found dead the next morning. Immediately following his death, John's family found a vial of black liquid in the cupboard that none of them have ever seen before. John Bell Jr. gave 2 droplets of the liquid to the family cat, who then died on the spot. As the family stood there in disbelief, the Bell Witch spoke up, saying that she had given John a big old dose of that last night to fix him right up. John's funeral was huge, with nearly everyone in the surrounding cities showing up to support the family. After his burial in their church's graveyard, the Bell Witch could be heard loudly singing about a bottle of brandy. She carried on until the last person left the graveyard. All the activity all but vanished after John Bell's death, almost like the Bell Witch had fulfilled her purpose. She was never heard of again until April of 1821, when she visited the now widowed Lucy Bell, saying she would return in 7 years. And sure enough, 7 years later, the Bell Witch returned to John Bell Jr., discussing the origin of life and civilization, as well as Christianity. 3 weeks later, she disappeared, this time promising her return in 107 years to the most direct Bell descendant. The most direct Bell descendant would be Dr. Charles Bailey Bell, the great-grandson of John Bell Jr. In 1934, Charles wrote a book on the Bell Witch, recalling the stories his father had told him growing up. Now, it's unclear if the Bell Witch ever returned in 1935, and unfortunately, we will never know. Charles Bailey Bell unfortunately died in 1945, leaving behind the legacy and the mysterious and terrifying story of the Bell Witch. Okay, guys, that is going to do it for today. I hope y'all really enjoyed that story today. If y'all did, make sure to smash a like on it, and also subscribe and turn on post notifications so you get notified every time I post a new video, because today's video took a really long time for me to film, so I really hope y'all enjoyed it. So if y'all did, make sure to leave it in the comments down below your most favorite part of today's video, and also leave it in the comments below more stories that you would want to hear, because I love doing stories like this. I had an amazing time filming this one. Even though it was just a voiceover, I still had a great time because I'm still behind the camera, like moving my hands around and actually getting real deep into the story and really thinking about it. So I'm glad y'all got to watch this video today. Share it out to anybody that you know, and so they can also hear the story of the Bell Witch. If you haven't heard the story of the Bell Witch, I really hope y'all enjoyed it. But if you have heard the story of the Bell Witch and you made it this far, I'm glad you made it this far. But that's going to be all for today's video. Thank y'all so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.